Welcome to Reddit Realms, your daily escape from the chaos of your day-to-day life. Settle in by our digital fireplace, relax, and get lost in some of Reddit's wildest stories. To new listeners, I share fresh Reddit stories every day to keep you company while you study, or to simply make you relax and free your mind. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd love to connect with you all. Now, grab a warm drink, get comfy, and let's jump into today's stories. I, 34M, found out my wife, 32F, secretly kept a goodbye letter from her ex, and I can't stop rereading it. This isn't a rage post or a revenge post. It's just something that's been sitting on my chest for months, and I don't know what to do with it anymore. My wife Emma and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. We met in our late 20s at a friend's game night. She was the type of person who made everyone else quieter just by speaking, not because she was loud, but because she listened like it was an art form. We moved in together after 2 years, got a dog, built a life that was, by most standards, calm and good. I thought we told each other everything. Then, 3 months ago, I was cleaning out the storage bench under our bed. You know, the miscellaneous drawer every couple has, full of old cords, birthday cards, and expired lotion. I was looking for our dog's vaccination record when I found a small, beat-up envelope tucked in the corner under a stack of old notebooks. It had no postage, just a name scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize. For E. I didn't mean to open it. I really didn't. I sat there staring at it for a solid 5 minutes, debating whether it was even my business. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I told myself maybe it was from her mom or an old friend. It wasn't. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter from her ex-boyfriend, Mark. They dated for 4 years in their early 20s, and she told me they broke up because they grew apart. I'd never thought much about him. Everyone has a past. But the letter, it wasn't angry or bitter. It was raw, quiet, devastatingly honest. It started with, "I hope you never read this, but I needed to write it anyway." He wrote about how he'd finally accepted that she didn't love him the same way he loved her, how he wished he'd been braver about asking her to stay, how he'd never met anyone else who made silence feel safe. He ended it with, "If there's ever a version of me you still keep in your heart, let him go. He's happy knowing you're somewhere that feels like home." My stomach dropped. What gutted me wasn't just the letter. It was the fact that she'd kept it, folded neatly, hidden. I don't know how long it had been there, maybe years, maybe before we got married, but I couldn't unsee it. I didn't confront her right away. For about a week, I just floated. Everything she said started sounding like it had subtext. When she smiled at me, I wondered if she was comparing it to someone else's smile. When she said "love you," I tried to measure how much she meant it. It was like living with a ghost, but the ghost was in her heart, not the house. Finally, one night while we were watching a show, I just blurted it out. "Who's Mark?" She froze. Not dramatically, just subtly, like a flicker before the lights go out. Then she said, "You went through my things?" "I found a letter," I said quietly, "in the bench." Her eyes filled instantly. Not anger, guilt. She didn't yell, she didn't deny it. She just said, "I didn't mean to hide it, I just couldn't throw it away." I asked her why. She said, "Because it was closure, for both of us." I told her, "It doesn't feel like closure if you're still keeping it." She said, "It's not about him anymore. It's about what it meant, that I was loved once in a way that hurt, and I survived it." That sentence hit me in the chest like a fist. I wanted to understand, I really did. I believe her when she says she's not in love with him. But the part that stings is knowing that she keeps that piece of her past close. Closer than I ever realized. I asked, "Why not just tell me?" She said, "Because it didn't matter, until now." We sat in silence for a long time after that. The TV was still playing, the dog snoring at our feet. I didn't yell or accuse her of anything. I just said, "Can I see it again?" She nodded. Went to the bedroom, came back holding it like it was something fragile. I read it again, slower this time, the handwriting looped and careful, like someone who meant every word. It didn't say, "I love you." It didn't ask her to come back. It was a goodbye, but one that she hadn't fully said back. I handed it back. She tore it in half without hesitating, then again and again until it was confetti. She said, "You're my home now." And I believed her, mostly. That was 3 months ago. Things have been fine, better even. We talk more. She's gentler. Like she knows she hurt me but wants to build something stronger over the crack. But sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and picture that letter. I can see the words burned into my mind. "He's happy knowing you're somewhere that feels like home." I keep wondering if that somewhere is me, or if it's just where she ended up. I haven't told anyone, not my friends, not family. Writing this is the first time I've said it out loud. I don't even know what I'm looking for. Forgiveness maybe, or reassurance that keeping a piece of your past doesn't mean you're still living in it. All I know is that I love her. I really do. I just wish I could forget the feeling of holding someone else's goodbye and realizing it meant more to her than I ever knew. Update. 2 weeks later, I wasn't planning to post again. But reading through the comments last time made me realize something. I've been grieving a version of my wife that never existed. A lot of people said, "She's human. She had a life before you." And as obvious as that sounds, it's something I needed to sit with. I think part of why that letter hit so hard was because I thought love was supposed to erase what came before. But it doesn't. It just layers over it. I brought it up again a few nights ago. We were cooking dinner and I asked her, "Do you ever think about him?" She said, "Sometimes. Not him, the person. Just who I was when I loved him. It reminds me of how far I've come." I told her, "I think I was jealous of your closure." She smiled, soft but sad. "Then let's make our own." So we did. We wrote each other letters, not sad ones, just honest ones. About what scared us, what we hoped for, what we'd learned from loving other people before we found each other. Hers said, "You don't need to erase my past to be my future." Mine said, "I just want to be the place you stop running." We folded them together and tucked them in a photo album next to a picture of us from our wedding day. I don't think about the old letter anymore. It's gone, for real this time. Sometimes when you love someone, you have to accept that they lived whole lives before you showed up. And that doesn't make your chapter any less important. It just means the story's bigger than you thought. Next up, a man confesses to accidentally uncovering his late grandmother's secret family and realizes half the town shares his last name for a reason. I, 29F, found out my mom has been lying about my dad for my entire life, and I met the man she said abandoned us. This is going to sound dramatic, but my whole sense of identity cracked open 3 months ago. I've spent my entire adult life thinking my dad was a ghost, someone who disappeared before I was even born. My mum always said, "He left when he found out I was pregnant. He didn't want a kid." That story shaped everything about how I saw myself, why I never asked about him, why I never pushed too hard when she shut down questions, why I grew up with this constant background noise in my brain saying, "People leave when things get real." Turns out, that wasn't even close to the truth. For context, my mum and I have always been close, or at least I thought we were. It was just the two of us growing up in a small town in Oregon. She worked 2 jobs, did everything for me, and drilled into me the importance of not relying on anyone else. When I was a kid and asked about my dad, she'd just say, "He's not worth your time." Once when I was 13, I pushed harder. She snapped and said, "He walked out on me before you were born. That's all you need to know." I remember crying that night, thinking I must have been something worth walking away from. It wasn't until I turned 29 that the truth started unraveling. It began with an ancestry kit, the kind you buy on sale around the holidays because you're bored and curious about whether your great-great-grandma was secretly French royalty or something. I spit in the little tube, mailed it off, and forgot about it. A few weeks later, I got an email. "You have a close family match." It said, "Paternal relative, possible parent or half-sibling." I stared at the screen for a solid minute before my brain caught up. Paternal, parent. The name listed was David W. age 55. Location, Seattle. I called my mum that night. "Mum," I said, "did Dad's name start with a D?" Silence, then cautious. "Why are you asking?" I told her about the ancestry match. She went quiet again, then said, "Those things aren't accurate, don't trust them." I said, "It says we share 49.8% DNA. That broke her composure. She sighed, the kind of sigh that sounds like 20 years of holding your breath, and said, "I was going to tell you someday." I said, "Tell me what?" That he didn't leave. She told me that my dad did know about me. He wanted to be in my life. They weren't married, but they were serious. When she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She'd just gotten into nursing school, her mom was sick, and she didn't want to be trapped. So she broke up with him before telling him she was pregnant. When he found out later through a mutual friend, he tried to reach out, called, wrote letters, even showed up at her parents' house, but she refused to see him. "I didn't want him in and out of your life," she said. "I thought it was better if you believed he was gone." I just sat there, completely hollowed out. "So you lied," I said. "I protected you," she said. We didn't speak for 2 weeks after that. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about this David W. I looked him up online. It wasn't hard. Seattle, right age, same last name that popped up in my results. There he was, a man with kind eyes, graying hair, a smile that made my stomach twist because it looked exactly like mine. He worked as a music teacher, married, no other kids listed on his social media. His bio said, teacher, husband, hopeless gardener. I debated for days whether to message him. My mum said not to. Leave the past where it is, she told me. But I couldn't. I needed answers. So I sent him a message. Simple. "Hi David, my name's Claire. I think we might be related. Did you know someone named Susan M. about 30 years ago?" He replied within an hour. "Claire, are you Susan's daughter?" My heart just stopped. "Yes," I typed. Then, "I always wondered what happened to you." We met 2 weeks later at a coffee shop halfway between us. I got there early, heart racing so hard it made my hands shake. When he walked in, I recognized him instantly, not from photos, but from something deeper. The way he tilted his head, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was like looking in a mirror that had 25 extra years on it. He said softly, "You look so much like her, and like me." We sat there for 3 hours. He told me his side of everything. He said when my mom ended things, he was confused but respected her space. When he found out she was pregnant, he tried to reach out, but she blocked every attempt. He even contacted her parents, who told him, "It's better for everyone if you move on." He said he sent birthday cards every year to her parents' house just in case. He never got a reply. At some point his voice broke. "I used to drive past your school when you were little," he said. "I didn't want to scare you or her, but I just wanted to see you were real." I asked him why he never tried again once I was an adult. He smiled, sad and small. "I figured if you wanted to find me, you would." We hugged before we left. It wasn't some cinematic, tear-soaked reunion. It was quiet, awkward, human, but it was something. I didn't tell my mum right away. I needed space to process it. When I finally did, she cried. Not defensive this time, just broken. "I know I stole that from both of you," she said. "I told myself I was protecting you from disappointment, but really, I was protecting myself from guilt. We're in therapy now, together. It's messy. I'm still angry, but I can see that she's trying, and I see him, my dad, every other weekend now. He came to one of my band's gigs. I play bass in a small indie group. When I got off stage, he hugged me and said, 'You didn't get that rhythm from your mum.' It was the first time I've ever heard pride in a father's voice directed at me. I went home that night and cried until my chest hurt. Not from sadness, but from the release of 30 years of missing something I didn't know I could have. Update. 6 weeks later, my dad came over for dinner last week. My mum joined us. I was nervous, thought it would be icy, awkward, unbearable. But weirdly it wasn't. They didn't reminisce. They didn't fight. They just existed in the same room like two people who had once been something and now were trying to be something else. Adults who share a daughter. At one point my mum said, "You know, she has your stubbornness." He laughed and said, "I wondered where she got that. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close." After dinner, when they left separately, I looked around the house and realized how small it suddenly felt. Like the walls were holding years of silence that had finally been spoken out loud. I think about that kid version of me sometimes. the one who used to sit by the window on Father's Day pretending not to care. I want to tell her he didn't leave you, he looked for you, and maybe, more importantly, you're allowed to rewrite the story. I don't know what my relationship with either of them will look like long term. There's still anger, grief, confusion, but also for the first time, peace. Because the truth might hurt, but lies hurt forever, and I'm done living inside someone else's version of my life. Sometimes the past doesn't knock, it whispers, and sometimes that whisper comes from an old phone, a forgotten voicemail, and a truth you never thought you'd hear. I, 28M, found a voicemail on my late father's old phone, from a man who loved him, and it changed everything I thought I knew about him. My dad passed away a year and a half ago. Heart attack, sudden, he was only 59. One minute he was sending me a photo of his dog asleep on the couch, and the next I was standing in his quiet house staring at a half-finished cup of coffee and the newspaper still open on the counter. He wasn't the emotional type. He was kind but distant, not cruel, just unreachable in a way. The kind of man who'd fix your flat tire but never say "I love you" out loud. Growing up, he was always working, always on the road, always somewhere else. We had our share of arguments. I used to tell my mum he cared more about his job than us. When I was 16, we didn't talk for almost a year after I told him I wasn't going to college right away. He called me a wanderer. I told him he was a ghost in his own house. We made up eventually, but even after that, our relationship was mostly surface level. We talked about sports, gas prices, the weather. Never anything real, so when he died, it hurt. But it also left me with this confusing mix of sadness and emptiness, like I was grieving a man I never really knew. When I went to help my mum clean out his things, she handed me his old phone, one of those battered Samsungs with a cracked corner and the world's worst ringtone. She said, "You can check if there's anything you want to keep." I figured it'd just be old photos and text threads about groceries. And at first it was. Hundreds of photos of his dog, screenshots of memes from 2017, and notes about random tools he wanted to buy. Then I opened his voicemail. There were only 6 messages. 5 were normal, spam, reminders, a coworker. The 6th was marked saved. The timestamp was 2 weeks before he died. It was from a man named James. The message was short, quiet. His voice was rough, older, careful with words. "Hey, I saw your truck outside the diner but didn't want to make things weird. Hope you're doing okay. I know we said we'd keep our distance. I'm just thinking about you. Always am. Call me if you want to talk, yeah? Okay. Bye." That was it, but the tone, the tenderness in it, hit me like a punch. I'd never heard anyone talk to my dad that way. Not my mom, not his friends. It wasn't platonic. It couldn't have been. I sat there on the edge of his bed, phone in my hand, replaying the message over and over until I could recite it word for word. Then I checked his contacts. No James, but there was a number saved as J. Same area code, same voice when I compared the outgoing voicemail message. For the next few days, I couldn't think about anything else. Who was this man? What did he mean by "we said we'd keep our distance"? Why did my dad save the message? I didn't tell my mom. I wasn't ready. It felt like holding a secret that didn't belong to me, but that somehow explained 1,000 things that never made sense. Like why my dad started taking solo trips up north every summer after he retired early. Or why, when I was younger, he used to linger watching certain old songs on TV. Not just listening, but remembering. Finally, I called the number. It rang twice. Then a man answered, cautious. "Hello?" "Hi," I said. My name's Alex. I'm John Miller's son." There was silence, then a small exhale. "Oh," he said. "Alex." He said my name like he already knew it. We talked for maybe 30 seconds before I asked, "You were close with my dad?" He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Yes, very." We met a week later. He suggested a coffee shop near the coast, halfway between his town and mine. When he walked in, I recognized him from the few pictures my dad had shown me years ago. An old fishing buddy, he'd called him James, late 50s, kind eyes, hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime fixing things. He sat down, and for a few seconds, neither of us spoke. He just looked at me and said, "You have his eyes." That was when I knew. I didn't even need him to say it. Over the next hour, he told me everything. He and my dad had met almost 20 years ago on a construction site upstate. Both divorced, both tired of pretending their lives made sense. It started as friendship, then turned into something more. He said, "We weren't trying to hide it. We were trying to survive it." I asked what he meant, and he smiled sadly. "Back then, your dad was terrified of losing you and your mum. He thought if anyone knew, he'd ruin both families. So we kept it quiet, even from each other sometimes. Apparently they were on and off for years. Sometimes they wouldn't talk for months. Other times they'd take off together on fishing trips and spend a weekend just existing without fear. The last few years before he died, they'd been seeing each other regularly again. My mum had moved to another city after their divorce, and I guess he'd finally stopped running from himself." I asked, "Did you love him?" He didn't hesitate. "I still do." I asked if my dad ever planned to tell me. He said he wanted to. He was scared you'd hate him. That broke me, because I realized in that moment that he'd spent his entire life loving someone in the shadows, and that the distance I'd felt from him wasn't lack of love. It was the weight of a secret he thought would lose him his son. After we said goodbye, James handed me an envelope. He asked me to give you this if anything ever happened to him. I opened it when I got home. It was a letter dated 6 months before he died. It started like this: "Hey kid, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you are..." I guess I didn't get to say some things I should have said a long time ago. He wrote about how proud he was of me, how sorry he was for the times he wasn't there. And near the end he wrote, "You once told me I live like a ghost. Maybe you were right. I've spent too much time trying to be the man everyone needed me to be, instead of just being the man I am. I hope someday you'll understand that love isn't always simple, but it's always real." That last line, I've read it at least 100 times. I finally told my mum a month later. I thought she'd be furious, but she just went quiet. Then she said, "I always wondered." She told me their marriage had been good at first, but there was always something she couldn't name. A distance, a sadness he never explained. "He wasn't cruel," she said. "He just always felt halfway gone." She wasn't angry. She just looked tired. Then she said, "I'm glad he had someone." We sat there in silence, both realizing that we loved the same man, and both realizing we hadn't really known him. Not fully. Now I talk to James every few weeks. He sends me photos of their old fishing trips. 2 men on a lake, sunburned and smiling. No pretense. Just peace. I showed one to my mum once. She smiled. That's the happiest I've ever seen him. I keep that photo framed on my desk now, not because I'm trying to rewrite who my dad was, but because I finally understand him. He wasn't distant, he was just hiding. And that hiding cost him pieces of the life he wanted. But it also gave me a chance, years later, to find the truth. And the truth, messy as it is, feels more like love than anything he ever said out loud. Sometimes love doesn't fit neatly inside the stories we tell. Sometimes it lives in the space between silence and confession, in a saved voicemail, a letter, and the courage it takes to listen. Some truths don't crash into your life, they hum quietly until you're finally ready to hear them. Sometimes the truth doesn't come crashing down, it seeps in quietly like water through old wood, until one day you look around and realize your whole foundation has shifted. I, 28 me, found a voicemail on my late father's old phone, from a man who loved him, and it changed everything I thought I knew about him. My dad died suddenly a little over a year ago. No long illness, no warning, just gone. One minute he was texting me a photo of his dog sprawled across the couch, and the next I was in his house standing over a still warm coffee mug and the morning paper he never finished. He was 59, too young, too unfinished. Growing up, my dad was a man of few words. He wasn't cold, exactly, just contained. He was one of those people who expressed love through action. If your car broke down, he'd show up before you even called. If you mentioned needing shelves, he'd build them. But emotional stuff? That was another planet. When I was a kid, I used to think he didn't feel things the way other people did. Later, when I got older, I realized he probably just didn't know how to say them. After my parents divorced when I was 15, he became even quieter. My mum said, "He's always been half somewhere else," and I didn't get what she meant until now. We spoke occasionally, holidays, birthdays, surface-level catch-ups. I loved him, but I never knew him. Not really. When he died, I helped my mum go through his things. She was calm in that scary way people get when grief hasn't hit yet. She handed me a box of his personal stuff, wallet, watch, old photos, and his phone. It was a clunky Samsung with a spiderweb crack across the corner. He never upgraded, said, "If it still rings, it still works." She told me to check if there were any photos or messages I wanted to keep before she wiped it. So one night I sat at my kitchen table and started scrolling. There were old texts to coworkers, dog pictures, grocery lists, screenshots of recipes. Nothing remarkable, nothing revealing. Then I opened his voicemail. There were only 6 messages. 5 were normal, spam calls, doctor reminders, a roofing company. The 6th was labeled saved. The timestamp was from 2 weeks before he died. I pressed play. A man's voice came through, soft, older, gentle in that way people sound when they're trying not to say too much. "Hey, I saw your truck at the diner this morning. Didn't want to make things weird. Hope you're doing okay. I know we said we'd keep our distance, but I've been thinking about you. Always am. Call me if you want to talk, yeah? Okay. Bye." That was it. 20 seconds, but it hit like a train. He didn't say my dad's name, didn't identify himself, but there was intimacy in that message. Familiarity, warmth. I'd never heard anyone speak to my dad like that. Not my mum, not anyone. The man's tone wasn't casual, it was careful. The kind of careful that comes from years of loving someone you can't talk about out loud. I replayed it again and again. My dad had saved this one voicemail, just this one. That detail haunted me. I looked through his contacts. There was a J, no last name, no photo. I clicked the number, cross-referenced it with the voicemail info. Same number. No text though, nothing in his email either. Just silence. I sat there for nearly an hour staring at the contact name like it was a riddle. And the longer I looked, the more my mind went to strange places. Who was this man? A friend, a co-worker, or something else? I tried to push it down, but curiosity and grief make a dangerous mix. The next day, I called my mom. I asked if she knew anyone named James or Jay in Dad's life. She hesitated. He used to go fishing with someone by that name. Why? I lied, said I'd seen the name in his notes and wondered if I should tell his friends about the funeral service. She paused again, then said, "I always thought that man made your father different, happier, lighter, but he stopped mentioning him years ago." That stuck with me. Happier. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen my dad truly happy. I thought about it for days. That voicemail looped in my head every night when I tried to sleep. Finally, I gave in. I called the number. It rang twice. Then, "Hello?" His voice was instantly recognizable. The man from the voicemail. I froze. My throat felt tight. "Hi, I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. My name's Alex. I'm John Miller's son." There was silence, then he breathed out slowly. "Alex." He said my name like it hurt. "You knew my dad?" A pause. "Yeah, I did. For a long time." Something in his tone confirmed everything I already suspected. We agreed to meet the next day. He chose a quiet cafe near the water. I got there early and sat by the window, nervous to the point of nausea. When he walked in, I recognized him instantly. Tall, older, kind face, weathered hands. The same hands I'd seen in my dad's old photos. The fishing buddy I'd never thought twice about. He smiled when he saw me, that same sad sort of smile my dad used to wear when he didn't know what to say. "Alex," he said again, "you look just like him." We ordered coffee, sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken things. Finally I asked, "You and my dad, were you together?" He looked down at his cup, nodded once. "For nearly 20 years. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, relief that I wasn't imagining it. all of it tangled together. He told me they'd met at a construction job up north. My dad was newly divorced, lonely, and James was working as a foreman. They started talking, then camping together, then, well, the rest unfolded quietly. He was terrified anyone would find out, James said. He'd just come out of a messy divorce and he was scared of losing you. You were everything to him, even when you didn't see him much. I asked why they kept it secret for so long. He shrugged. Because it wasn't safe to be honest back then, not where we lived, not for men like us. And by the time the world changed a little, he thought it was too late to start over. There were tears in his eyes when he said that. He wanted to tell you. He almost did. I think he was waiting for the right moment. But then his heart, he stopped himself. He ran out of time. I think that was the first time I ever saw my dad clearly, through someone else's love for him. Before we parted, James handed me an envelope. He told me to give this to you if he ever passed. It was thick, old, the paper slightly yellowed. I didn't open it until that night. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 6 months before his death. Hey kid, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it to tell you in person. I've made a lot of mistakes, most of them out of fear. I was scared you'd see me differently if you knew everything about me. I want you to know that every choice I made, right or wrong, came from trying to protect you and your mum. Even when it looked like I was far away, I never stopped caring. You once said I live like a ghost. Maybe you were right. I've spent most of my life haunting the spaces between who I am and who I thought I should be. There's someone named James. He's been my best friend, my anchor, and more than that, he's a good man. I hope someday you'll meet him and understand that love doesn't have to fit inside anyone's rules. If I never said it enough, I'm proud of you. I love you. I always have. Dad. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe 3. The letter blurred and reappeared as the tears came and went. That was the first time I'd ever seen my dad write the word love. It's been 6 months since then. I visit James sometimes. We go to that same cafe. We talk about fishing, dogs, music, and eventually about my dad. He told me about the time my dad surprised him with a guitar on his birthday, even though he couldn't play a note. About how they used to drive to a little lake 2 hours north just to sit in silence, side by side, without fear. He showed me photos, old Polaroids of them laughing, covered in mud, arms around each other. They looked free. I brought one of those photos home. My mom saw it on my fridge. She stared for a long moment and said softly, "That's the happiest I've ever seen him." I expected bitterness, but she smiled instead. "I always knew he was hiding something," she said. "I'm just glad it wasn't pain. I'm glad it was love." We talked for a long time that night, about forgiveness, about secrets, about how people are more complicated than the versions we build of them. She told me, "He loved you more than you'll ever know. He just didn't know how to show it." I think in some way she found closure too. Sometimes I replay that voicemail, not because it hurts, but because it doesn't anymore. There's peace in hearing someone say, "I'm thinking about you," even when the person who saved it isn't here to answer. I've kept that message saved the way he did. It feels like a small circle closing. One secret becoming a story, one ghost finally finding rest. And when I miss him, I remind myself, maybe love doesn't have to make sense to be real. Maybe it just has to exist, quietly, stubbornly, even if it never got the chance to be seen. My dad spent his life half in shadow, but in the end, he left behind light. In his words, in his courage, in the people who loved him enough to finally tell the truth. And now, when I think of him, I don't see a man hiding anymore. I see someone who finally came home, even if it took a lifetime to get there. Some truths don't explode. They unfold slowly, like letters meant to be found when the world is ready to understand them.